Chapter 5, Tender Wings of Desire. From a distance, the town looked shabby, but the closer Madeline got, the more charming the sleepy hamlet became. It was a crowded place. Every home and store was built as close to the water as possible, giving it a quaint, crooked look, as if it were a drawing in a children's book. This made it more endearing than ramshackle. The buildings were crowded together and seemed to spill out near the docks of the harbor, where several fishing boats bobbed up and down like toys. The cobblestones were a little uneven, so Madeline dismounted in order to better guide Persephone through the streets. No one gave her a second glance as she walked, for once melting into the background. Here, she wasn't the eldest daughter of Lord Parker. She was just a traveling woman looking for an opportunity or two. She walked down the street that separated most of the town from the docks of the harbor and kept an eye out for any opportunity. Her eyes rested on a boat or two, though she knew that wasn't possible given the fact that she had absolutely no idea what to do on a boat. When she did find her future, it did not hit her like a lightning bolt or some sort of glorious, inspired wave. Instead, she merely looked up and saw it. It was a tavern, clearly one that had catered to the sailors who came into the harbor. It was small, with a rickety wooden sign that had an anchor etched into it along with the tavern's name, the Admiral's Arms. Madeline had never been inside of a tavern, but as she looked up at the place, she figured that there was the first time for everything. This direction felt right for her. After tying Persephone to the post outside, Madeline threw back the hood of her traveling cloak and entered the tavern with a pounding heart. It was a dim place, lit only by the occasional lantern or two, with wooden tables and a fireplace that was currently bare. The long bar was at the center of the space and was empty except for the person standing behind it. She had to be the most beautiful woman Madeline had ever seen, with bright red hair and dark eyes that looked at Madeline warily. "Is everything all right?" the woman asked with a musical voice, speaking in an accent that Madeline did not recognize. She threw the towel that she had been using to clean the bar over her shoulder and fixed Madeline with a stare that was more concerned than guarded. For some reason, the gentleness of the woman's look touched Madeline in a way that surprised her. How messy she must look, dirty from traveling while the salt air did interesting things to her curls. Suddenly, Madeline felt so unsure of herself, like she did not belong. The woman waited patiently for Madeline to gather the nerve to speak. "I was looking for a job," Madeline said. This clearly came as a surprise to the woman. "Really now?" Madeline realized that the accent clearly wasn't some mystical form of British, but she still hadn't narrowed it down from that. Perhaps it was Irish or Scottish? She had never heard an Irish voice, but her nanny had been Scottish. "Yes," Madeline gave another look and realized this was exactly where she wanted to be. The woman looked around as well, as if following Madeline's look, which gave Madeline a nervous feeling. "I cannot do the hiring," the woman said, "but I need help at nights, and Carson, he's the owner, is never one to actually do the helping, and he's always too lazy to take on anyone new. Why don't you stay and help me tonight, and then we can convince him? If you are here and willing, there's no way he'll say no." Madeline had not been expecting this response, and it took her a moment to sink in. The woman smiled with kindness. "Really?" Madeline finally said. "I do not know what to say." "Sure," the woman replied. "All you have to do is tell me your name. I figure that is a start." Madeline blushed. "It is Madeline." The woman nodded. "The name's Kiva, and please do not ask me to spell it because it is nothing like it sounds." "Is it not Keeva?" Madeline asked, already feeling the grin come to her face. Kiva rooted under the bar and pulled out a white linen apron, passing it to Madeline. "Not even close. Now put that on and act like you work here. Carson will be none the wiser, and welcome to town." "I do not even know what it is called," Madeline confessed. Kiva laughed. "Missel Thrush by the Sea," she replied. "It is a mouthful, but has a bit of a romantic flair to it. Do you not think?" Madeline did not know about the romance, but she did know that she could easily grow to love this town. Madeline turned out to be a quick study in the ways of bartending. mostly because it was an incredibly simple thing to do once someone got their mind wrapped around it properly. Kiva's method of teaching was relatively no-nonsense. She relied heavily on treating the student as though she already knew what was being asked of her, and Madeline could fake her way through it, surprised at how easily she could pick it up. Of course, it was simple enough. Wipe down the tables, pull drinks for whoever asked for them. After 6 o'clock, a cook would come in and put together some sort of dinner fare. Nothing too special, Kiva said with a wave of her hand and a sniff that implied she could do better. Once Madeline learned the basics, she then learned a little bit about Kiva. She was Irish, which Madeline should have guessed, and had come to England a few years ago for a change of pace. I do not think it is as much of a change of pace as I would have liked, Kiva admitted, but I do like the view. The view was indeed spectacular, and the tavern exploited it for all that it was worth by installing giant windows that showed a view of the harbor and the sea beyond. Madeline stopped now and again to take in the view, but quickly returned to work, fearful that Carson would see her and find her wanting. "Do not be afraid of the crowds when they come in," Kiva said once she caught sight of the ships on the horizon. "They are not the scoundrels they all think they are." It hadn't occurred to Madeline to be afraid of the sailors, but now that Kiva had said something, it was all she could think about for the rest of the afternoon. There were certain things that occurred to Madeline that, because of her privileged upbringing, she simply did not know. Kiva's eyes had widened in surprise and a little concern when Madeline told her a slightly edited version of her story. Of course, she left out the part where she was a lady marrying a dude and instead just told the basics of her journey. Kiva seemed scandalized. "All by yourself?" she said with wide eyes. "With no protection?" Madeline almost asked what protection she could possibly need. She had a horse and she could ride like the wind. What else was there? But the look on Kiva's face suggested there were certain truths that she might not want to know. Then the shadows began to grow long on the ground, the ships started to come in, and so did the sailors. They were a rambunctious bunch, but Madeline wasn't as scared of them as she thought she would be. Kiva admitted that they were merely fishermen who went out to sea during the day and returned home to their wives at night. They certainly smelled like it to Madeline, like salt and fish, but she found she did not hate it. They were polite, removed their hats, and asked polite questions about the new worker. Kiva had a terrific rapport with most of them, pouring their tankards of ale and joking with them. Madeline desperately wanted to have that easy rapport, but she knew that it would take time. Hopefully time was what she had. Carson arrived at 6:30 and turned out to be completely different than what Madeline was expecting. She had pictured him as some grizzled old man, perhaps a former sailor with tattooed forearms and a perpetually grumpy expression on his face. Well, some of that was true. He did seem perpetually grumpy. He was actually much younger than she had anticipated. She wasn't sure, but he might have been any age between Winston and her father, with brown hair already touched with gray. He walked in and greeted some of the regulars, glanced at Madeline, and moved to the till to see how much they had made for that evening before stopping to send a confused look Madeline's way. "Kiva," he said slowly, "you look different." "Do not try to be funny, Carson," Kiva said, coming out from the back where she had been checking on things with the cook. "It does not become you." Carson scowled at her, but even Madeline could see that there wasn't any malice in it. "Then would you care to explain?" he asked her. Kiva wiped down the bar and put a tankard of ale for a customer who had just arrived. "I need help around here, Carson. I've been telling you that for how long? And like some angel from heaven, this woman comes out of nowhere. Excuse me, sorry. This woman comes out of nowhere looking for employment. I did not dare say no to such a wretched creature." Carson turned to look at her, taking in her relatively well-made dress, simple as though it was, and glancing at her hands, which, in spite of working all afternoon, still had the softness of someone who had never worked a day in her life. Madeline gave him the most winning smile, and he sighed. "You have a place to live?" he asked her. For some reason, this question took her off guard. That is a no. Listen, dearie, I do not know where you've come from or why. I do not know what you are really doing here, or even if there's an answer for that. But you smell like money, even if you do not know it, and I really hope you will not be bringing trouble to my door." "I do not plan to," Madeline said, still a little dazed at how easily she had been figured out. Carson studied her face again and seemed to like what he found, because he nodded and turned to Kiva. I trust you on this one, but do you mind if she shares the room upstairs with you? Kiva nodded. I figured you'd ask me to do that, so I did not have much of a choice. Cheeky girl. And that was that. Carson went into the back to see how the cook was handling the stew he was making for that evening, and Kiva smiled in triumph. See? I knew he would not argue once I got you here. It is not his way. Welcome to the Admiral's Arms, Madeline. I hope you have many happy days here. With that, Kiva walked away to see a customer, and Madeline was left to process the fact that she had successfully found a job and her immediate concerns had been solved. For the first time since she had left her parents' manor in the dead of night, Madeline felt herself smiling in a way that was completely hopeful. Well, 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 what have we here? Did Kiva finally convince Carson to hire a new worker? Madeline turned to answer the man, not quite caring for his tone, only to come face to face with the most handsome man she had ever seen.